Yeah, Julie, the farmers I talked with tonight, so their profit margins are already incredibly tight, so they cannot afford to lose their Chinese buyers.
And the president's trade war has put America's farmers in a pathway of complete destruction.
38 million Americans, roughly 1 in 9, are currently living in food insecurity, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. That's the highest figure recorded since the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the trend isn't slowing. Over the past 12 months, U.S. food prices have climbed by 4.7%, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, driven by a perfect storm of rising input costs, supply chain disruption, and agricultural instability. At the retail level, the impact is immediate and painful. Ground beef now averages over $6.20 per pound, marking an all-time high, while industrial chicken, once a staple of American protein consumption, is increasingly scarce due to a resurgence of avian flu outbreaks in commercial flocks. The price tags at the grocery store are just one symptom of a deeper dysfunction within the U.S. food system. Behind those numbers is a grim picture playing out in the heartland. In states like Iowa, Texas, and California, farmers are leaving fields, fallow cutting back livestock herds, and canceling machinery orders for future planting seasons. Many cite unmanageable costs, skyrocketing fertilizer prices, unaffordable diesel, and tightening credit. Others point to labor shortages and policy gridlock in Washington that have left them without support or clarity. A growing number of small to mid-sized operations are simply opting out, choosing not to plant, not to harvest, and in some cases, not to continue at all. This is not a developing world famine story. It's unfolding inside the most advanced agricultural economy on Earth. And it raises a fundamental question. How can the country that grows more food than any other be watching its farmers abandon their land, while millions of its citizens struggle to afford a basic meal? Across the United States, farmers are facing a crisis that's not just economic, but existential. In the first half of 2025, farm bankruptcies surged by more than 50% compared to the same period in 2024, according to the Farm Credit Council and independent reporting by Bloomberg. While farm failures have historically followed weather events or market downturns, this wave is different. It's the result of structural contradictions within the system itself. On one end, input costs have skyrocketed. Fertilizer prices remain elevated due to ongoing supply chain disruptions and trade restrictions, particularly related to Chinese exports and global natural gas markets. Diesel fuel prices are hovering at their highest levels since 2022, driven in part by international instability and a slowdown in refining capacity. Meanwhile, farm insurance premiums have risen sharply due to a spike in claims from extreme weather events, drought in the West, floods in the Midwest, further straining cash flow for growers and ranchers. The result, profit margins have vanished, and in many cases, operations are running at a loss. Yet, even as costs rise for producers, prices received at the farm gate remain flat or declining. Large-scale supermarket chains and wholesale buyers exert downward pressure on commodity prices, often locking in contracts that fail to reflect real-time inflation. Additionally, logistical costs fuel warehousing cold storage freight have exploded, absorbing much of the added value before it ever reaches producers. In short, farmers are spending more than ever to grow food, but earning less than ever for what they produce. Compounding this economic imbalance is a growing dysfunction in the physical food supply chain itself. The system is suffering from a dangerous duality of surplus and scarcity. In some regions, crops are rotting in the fields, not because of a poor yield, but because there simply aren't enough workers to harvest them. The continued failure of U.S. agricultural visa reform and a patchwork immigration system has left critical labor gaps unfilled, particularly in high-value labor-intensive sectors like fruit, vegetables, and dairy. At the same time, other regions report empty shelves and delayed deliveries as distribution networks struggle with equipment shortages, driver scarcity, and increased cyber vulnerabilities. Notably, cold chain infrastructure in both the US and Europe has been repeatedly disrupted in 2025 by cyberattacks targeting warehouse automation and temperature control systems, according to reporting by Reuters and Financial Times. These attacks have not only increased spoilage, but also heightened uncertainty and insurance costs across food logistics. The combined effect is a food system caught in a self-defeating spiral, a structure that simultaneously overproduces and underdelivers. Farmers are being squeezed from both sides, unable to profit and unable to distribute. Consumers, meanwhile, see rising prices and shrinking availability, not realizing that the problem isn't just what's on the shelves, but what's broken behind the scenes. What we're witnessing is not a supply shortage. In the traditional sense, it's a crisis of coordination, efficiency, and policy alignment. And unless these internal contradictions are addressed, the world's most productive food economy may become one of its most unstable. Before starting with the next part, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more breaking news. The unraveling of the U.S. agricultural sector in 2025 is not due to any single catastrophe. It is the product of multiple interlocking failures that together have pushed one of the world's most advanced food systems toward dysfunction. This is a multi-layered crisis in which inconsistent trade and subsidy policy, climate extremes, and a broken labor pipeline are combining to erode the foundations of American food security. Each layer of the problem compounds the others, creating a feedback loop of instability that is proving extremely difficult to reverse. The first layer is policy inconsistency, particularly in the area of trade and agricultural support. In April 2025, the U.S. government imposed a sweeping 145% tariff on a broad array of Chinese imports, including industrial machinery, chemical fertilizers, and irrigation components. While positioned as a bold move to strengthen domestic manufacturing, the tariff has had profound knock-on effects in the agricultural sector where many essential inputs are globally sourced. Prices for farm machinery and equipment have surged, and the cost of synthetic fertilizers, already volatile due to global natural gas prices, has skyrocketed, placing heavy financial strain on producers. Simultaneously, farmers were counting on relief from the long-delayed 2025 Farm Bill, which promised enhanced crop insurance, disaster relief, and access to low-interest credit. But the bill remains stalled in Congress amid partisan gridlock, leaving tens of thousands of producers without critical resources at the start of planting season. Promises have been made, but without legislation, they remain hollow. The second layer is climate disruption, which has increasingly become a structural driver of agricultural instability in the U.S. This year, Texas, Colorado, and California are experiencing one of the most prolonged droughts in decades. Rainfall levels are down by as much as 40% in key growing regions, according to NOAA data, and water reserves are being diverted toward urban needs or restricted altogether. As a result, livestock producers have been forced to cull their herds due to dried-out grazing lands. Many cropland operations are choosing to leave fields fallow rather than risk expensive planting, followed by yield failure. On top of that, a renewed avian influenza outbreak has ravaged poultry farms across the Midwest and Southeast, leading to the culling of over 10 million birds in an effort to contain the spread. The result is a significant reduction in egg and poultry supply, driving up prices and increasing pressure on alternative protein markets. The third and perhaps most frustrating layer is the collapse of the agricultural labor system. Labor shortages are not new in U.S. farming, but they have reached crisis levels in 2025. Farmers across the country, particularly those growing fruits, vegetables, and other labor-intensive crops, report that fields are going unharvested simply because there are not enough workers to pick the produce. At the core of this problem is the H-2A guest worker program, the federal visa system designed to facilitate temporary agricultural labor. Despite decades of bipartisan calls for reform, the program remains understaffed, bureaucratically sluggish, and unable to scale to the real-world needs of farm operators. In the absence of legal and timely labor, some farmers have raised wages and offered housing or bonuses, but even these measures have not been enough to fill the gap. Simultaneously, stricter immigration enforcement policies have further reduced the already limited labor pool, turning what could be a solvable workforce issue into a chronic structural failure. Together, these factors, costly and unpredictable policy, climate volatility, and labor system failure, form a web of interdependent pressures. This is not merely a momentary supply disruption. It is a sign that the basic mechanics of how America grows, processes, and distributes food are no longer functioning as they should. Without coordinated intervention across trade, immigration, environmental, and agricultural policy, the nation's food system may continue to fracture quietly but irreversibly. Before starting with the next part, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more breaking news. While the United States grapples with its internal agricultural collapse, the cracks in the global food system are spreading far and wide. What was once perceived as a series of localized disruptions caused by regional droughts, disease outbreaks, or policy failures is now taking shape as a coordinated transnational crisis. From South Asia to Eastern Europe to Latin America, the world's food infrastructure is being tested in real time, and no region is immune to the consequences. In India, one of the world's largest agricultural producers and exporters, tens of thousands of farmers have taken to the streets in renewed waves of protest, demanding legally guaranteed minimum support prices, MSPs, for key staples such as wheat, rice, mustard, and lentils. These protests are not new. They echo earlier movements that drew global attention in 2020-2021, but this time the discontent is fueled by worsening input costs, erratic weather, and broken promises by government officials. Many of these farmers argue they are being squeezed out of viability, and unless prices are guaranteed, millions of smallholders could be forced to abandon farming altogether, which would have ripple effects far beyond India's borders. Meanwhile, in Brazil, a severe outbreak of avian influenza has caused major international buyers, most notably China, to suspend poultry imports. This is no small disruption. Brazil is the world's largest exporter of chicken, and the suspension has reverberated through global protein markets, causing price spikes not only in Asia but also in secondary markets in Africa and the Middle East. With global meat supplies already strained by climate-related feed shortages and geopolitical friction, the sudden removal of Brazilian poultry from international supply chains has accelerated volatility in both wholesale and retail pricing. In Eastern Europe, the lingering impact of the war in Ukraine continues to destabilize grain markets. According to estimates from the Ukrainian Ministry of Agrarian Policy, the country's wheat exports have declined by 23% in 2025 due to a combination of military conflict, port blockades, and extreme weather conditions. In parallel, Russia has increased its share of global wheat exports using its geopolitical influence to secure exclusive trade deals with countries in Africa and Asia. This realignment not only creates dependency on Russian grain, but also reduces the overall flexibility of the global grain system, heightening the risk of famine in vulnerable regions. Across the United Kingdom and continental Europe, inflationary pressure on food prices has returned with force. In April 2025, the UK's Office for National Statistics reported that food inflation had surged to 6% year-over-year, driven by rising energy costs, packaging material shortages, and regulatory bottlenecks. In the background, the cold chain infrastructure across Europe has suffered multiple cyberattacks targeting distribution centers and temperature control systems, leading to spoilage and shipment delays. Meanwhile, in Central America, a large-scale labor strike in Panama's banana sector has led to the dismissal of over 5,000 workers and a double-digit increase in banana prices in North America, highlighting how even a single node in the global chain can send costs soaring thousands of miles away. What we are witnessing is a systemic unraveling of food security, not as a result of scarcity, but of fragility. The global system is dense, interconnected, and highly efficient under ideal conditions. But under pressure from climate politics, labor unrest, and biosecurity threats, it begins to fracture in ways that compound quickly. The food crisis of 2025 is not localized. It is planetary, and the price of ignoring its complexity is already being paid at checkout counters in farm bankruptcies and in rising hunger around the world. America's food system was once the most resilient in the world. By 2025, it's cracking, not because of disaster, but because of policy inconsistency, poor coordination, and short-term thinking. If farmers can't survive, the food system collapses, period. Consumers can cut back. But when farmers walk away from the land, there's nothing left to cut.